Hello, my darlings. I am absolutely delighted to be sharing a recorded conversation with one of my dearest friends and sisters, Tanya Weeks, who is an entrepreneur, a single mum, a creative. She's worked in many fields, and I feel that something that she may not have put into her resume is coach. Um, Tanya runs one of Australia's most successful and premier indoor cycling studios, and it's called Fisher's Cycle. And it's no, it's, the synchronicity is not going unnoticed. Is that I work with menstrual cycles, and you've also got the name cycle in your business title. So I feel that that connection is kind of sort of perfect as well. And today I'm going to have an open conversation with Tan, primarily about her own journey with IVF and her decision making process and what it entailed along the way from the time she decided that's where she was going to go for and to the time where she brought her beautiful baby boy into the world. Hi, Tan.
Oh, hi, Beck. What a beautiful intro. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My love, like one of the questions I really uh, love to ask every woman that joins me in a sacred conversation is, can they remember their first moon, their first bleed, their menarche, and how was that for you?
It's quite a few years back now, but I do remember getting it, and I remember I was either in very early high school or really late primary school. So the age has bypassed me. I can't remember how old I was, but I remember being at school, and I remember getting it at school, and I remember crying. So that I'll never forget. And I remember going. I don't the at, at school or on the day. I do remember running out to the car, and my mum was waiting for me, and I remember going out and crying again and just letting her know that I had got it. But that's it. In terms of the story, that's it. I don't remember a conversation that I had with my mum. I don't remember what she said to me or how we handled it. So that mustn't have been a very specific thing that I wanted to recall, or maybe it just wasn't, there wasn't much to the conversation. But I definitely remember that she would have given me a pad, because I remember a friend of mine introducing me to tampons and being the one who showed me how to use those. So I can't imagine that it was a very profound conversation at the time that I got it with my mum. I just definitely remember being at school, and the fear was the first reaction, because it evoked tears.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not uncommon, darling. And I'm wondering how that moment has affected your relationship with your menstrual cycle throughout your life.
I had a very unstable menstrual cycle at the beginning, like probably most women do. Um, so I think it was only when I sort of stabilized a bit more as I got older, and that was probably, looking back now, and it's incredible that that sometimes we have to wait so long for insight or information, but that's life, or maybe it shouldn't be. But I remember maybe would have been, well past my teens and into my early 20s before it stabilized. And I think that was probably in relation to food I was eating when I started to get more into fitness and health and nutrition. But I had and even into my very early beginning of my relationship, my long relationship, I do remember still being with him at the beginning and going through extreme highs and then extreme lows all around my period time. And that was just the instability of my hormones. And there was almost huge relief when my period did come and my menstrual cycle did flow. It was like this build up, and I was always inconsistent with my date. So I'd be 5 days or 6 days over, and for every day that I went over, my condition would worsen. So my emotional state, my erratic behavior, my body, my breasts, everything would just be swelling and swelling and expanding. And so I hated it. I feared it. I dreaded every single month that it would come. And I tried different pills and different things to sort of stabilize it, and I responded really badly to all of them, and I just didn't like taking any or uh, contraception. So I just didn't feel that they worked well within my own body. So I preferred to suffer and go through each menstrual cycle and each month in agony, really. So yeah, I don't know whether the initial conversation or maybe lack of conversation or support around the first bleed was ever associated to the way I then kept dreading every single month, but I didn't have a great relationship with it. For many, many years, I just dreaded it.
Just letting that land. It's not an uncommon story. The more conversations that I have with women, I'm really learning that it's all of our story, and sisters that have gone through this phase, this early phase of fear and dread, and having not had the conversations around what to expect and how to nurture and nourish their bodies, do feel quite similar. And you mentioned until you started to look at your food and I know, well, I know, but many people may not know that you actually are one of the people in my life that train like an elite athlete. Tanya's, at certain times that I've shared space with her, being teaching 4 to 6 high intensity spin classes a day or HIIT classes a day. And I know that you are particularly aware of your diet. And I'm wondering whether you noticed when you were training that heavily, because it was quite a few years now that you've been training that way. Had it changed around your menstruation, or had you noticed your menstruation changing, so therefore adjusted your diet?
So, I would only look back now and associate the change, right? Because I'm aware of so many different things. But at the time, when my menstrual cycle became a lot more stable and a lot more predictable, so it arrived on the day or close to the day, would have been when I did begin training and looking after my body a lot better, but definitely with my nutrition. As soon as I really began to understand how nutrition can really nurture the body, and I switched to a progression of my life, right? So when you do train at this level, I think you realize very quickly that nutrition becomes the most important factor to be able to enhance the way you can train and make you feel. So looking back now, just switching to high essential fatty acid foods, and eliminating processed and refined sugars, and so when that nutrition balance changed, I think so did my hormones, or maybe it was age as well. But I think it wasn't really until I was well into my 30s, which is also when I became an instructor at this level, or trained at this level, is when I felt that my body balanced better around my cycle, and that it came more regularly. But I also did notice, and there's a funny story attached to this, which I did speak about on one of my podcasts, somebody else last week. But if I lost too much weight around my training, then it would impact my flow. So I would miss periods, or they wouldn't come. And so that would have a detrimental effect on my flow, because it would obviously then concern me, because when the body starts to preserve itself, one of the first things that it does do is affect your menstrual cycle, because it takes a lot of energy and things to produce, obviously, that part of your body's cycle. So yeah, I found when I was well balanced, when I was eating well, I was training well, I wasn't training too excessively, that's when my hormones and my body became a lot more in sync. But as I'm sure we'll go into, it wasn't until I actually went into my IVF process and I became pregnant that I felt the most hormonally balanced in my life ever, which tells me that maybe I did have some kind of hormone imbalance well through my, teens and into my early adult life. I just didn't know where to go or what to do. It just wasn't something that I ever looked into.
Yeah. And I do recall like a conversation that we had around this time when you were pregnant, where you were saying that you actually felt the best, the clearest, had all of the things, the best skin, the best hair, the most energy, and the most life force going through. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I want to go into that a little further, but I'd like to just rewind just a little bit to when it was that you felt that you would go along this IVF journey, and yeah, how that decision making process was made. Like, I find this so fascinating, and it's sometimes a subject that's not really spoken openly about. Sometimes a subject that women pretend it's not happening and feel like shame that their own bodies are not working in particular ways. However, your story is quite unique. You are a single mum by choice. I'm saying by choice, but I feel that you were really focused and dedicated on that decision. And you were juggling the business as well as creating new things. Yeah, what led you to that decision, Tam?
So as you mentioned, I began my business, or I started my new career or journey into my business and setting up the studio later in my adult life. So I incorporated it, and I think I opened the studio when I was 35. So I left a long-term relationship a few years before that. So for me, when I was leaving that relationship, and it was primarily to go on a self-discovery journey of my own, and you really need to be on your own, I think, to do that. I wasn't in a position where I was happy to give over the rest of my life to somebody else when I didn't really know who I was at the time. So later, going into that decision, it was always in the back of my mind that starting this growth or this journey of self-development would probably mean that I would need to be on my own for a period of time, and I was doing that at a later stage of my life. Babies weren't really on the table for me anyway at that point. It was never something I yearned or wanted to be a part of my life for a long time. The only thing that really ever triggered that or questioned that was when my sister had babies, and obviously that love of my nephews came into my life. But my head was down. I was focused on my company, building my brand and going through my own personal development. So I really only landed on the other side of that in my very early 40s. And when I put my head up to look at the rest of my life, I realized that I was running out of time to make other decisions. And I had to think very, very quickly about if those questions were around children. I wasn't in another relationship. There had been, people that had come and gone, but nobody that were a long time. Or people that, obviously were people that I wanted to have long term and go down this journey together with. And I wasn't prepared to look into that option at that time, because relationships take time to build. You never really know someone for quite a long time in the beginning of a relationship, and it's a huge decision. I've seen many people separate with children and realize that partner is not only not good for them, but probably not someone that they want to have as an influence in their children's lives. And that decision is too late. You are attached to that person, and that person will have a fundamental influence and effect on these little people for the rest of their lives. And I knew that someone that was going to come into my potential future child's life would need to be quite self-developed and have a level of conscious awareness before I'd be willing to bring them into my life, let alone a child's life. So that part of the equation was out of off the table. And I, when I thought about children and is it something that I wanted, I was straight away going to go down the path of looking for a donor. And yeah, never really looked back. Just started that journey straight away through a mutual friend of ours who had done a lot of research, and I dived into it one step at a time, and that's the approach that I took. If it was meant to be, I would continue to move forward, and I just kept looking for green lights and for the flow. It had to flow. It wasn't something I was deeply wanting, but I owed it to myself to answer the internal question of, is it for me? Is it meant to be something that is for me? If it is meant to be, then it will work. And if it isn't, then I will be so grateful that I honored that burning question in me, and I will always look back and know that I tried, and that was the piece that I was looking for.
Blessed that it works.
Yes, and then here he is. Round one, and I'm like, well, you're meant to be here.
Yeah, he's totally meant to be here. So what are the steps? I mean, it is always great when you know someone that's researched it and has some guidance there for you. But is simple, like for someone that doesn't know, going into their GP and saying, this is what I want to do? And then what's next, and what's after that, and what led you? Because I know that you went to Malaysia, so from step one to being in Malaysia, and we'll talk about the hormones and what you were putting into your body at that time as well in a moment. But yeah, step one to get to Malaysia, what's that journey like?
So and you had begun to do this work too. And so I do remember the conversation began with, well, is your menstrual cycle still on track? And I think for me, that's where I began. My bleed was consistent. It was accurate. It was still on time every single month. The pattern hadn't changed. The intensity of it hadn't changed. And so I knew that that is a sign, that is a vital sign, that is something that tells you everything is still working. The only thing it can't tell you is quality of your eggs, but it does tell you that yes, your body is still in its right cycle, right? It hasn't changed or veered off from that. And so I was too overwhelmed with where do I begin, and that's exactly where I began. So, and that's the advice that I was given, was to go to your GP and ask for blood tests. What is your body telling you? Do you have any imbalances, STDs, or all the things that they were looking for in those first blood tests. And then they also test for AMH, which is your levels of ovarian reserve, so that it will tell you on an average for your age, you're meant to have a specific amount come through on the tests, so a percentage, and mine was quite high, so that there are numbers that all relate to where you should be sitting around your age, and mine was just above average. So that told me that my reserve was getting low, as it does with age, but it was above where it needed to be at that age. That was a good sign. So I moved forward to the next stage, and the next stage for that was to go and have a look at my ovaries, and from there I could be told how many follicles that I have, and so on this self-discovery of fertility at that point, I mean, I had no idea on anything prior to that point. What's a follicle? How many am I supposed to have? What's an ovarian reserve? Do we run out of eggs? Like, it's unbelievable how women don't know this information. Because and interestingly enough, I just had this conversation for my own podcast about all the steps and all the the processes that I went through, because it's really important for women right now in this day and age to say, I'm gonna have children late in life. I want to put my career first, and that is well and truly within our decision to and our right to make those decisions. But if you are going to make them, then you need to understand you can't just put your life on hold. You may not that's a really good place to start for everybody, is to know what's your ovarian reserve position, and then you can also make the choices to freeze eggs. But at that stage, I was 40. I think I'm in denial. Last conversation, I kept saying I was 41, but I was 43. I had just turned 43, and I knew that I had to find all this information out very quickly. So I went for my scan. My scan told me that I had 11 follicles left, which was still quite high for my age. And all these numbers started to spit out percentages, right? So with my AMH level and my follicle level, it gave me at that stage about an 8% chance of IVF working for me at that age. So it was a very low percentage.
Wow.
And the only thing that I kept saying to myself in the mantra, which I had to keep repeating, and when I was in the process, I just had to people had to keep reminding me that at that stage, it's not about how many, it's not quantity, it's quality. And I knew that I had led a very high exercise and nutrition lifestyle, or a well-balanced nutrition lifestyle for such a long time in my later age of late 30s, and it was the only thing that was really keeping me grounded during that process, to think that potentially I've preserved my age and my egg quality, which is why we are advocates for health and fitness, because that is one of the things that it does do. But 11 follicles then gave me 11 egg potential through IVF, and IVF stimulates all the follicles during one cycle, whereas our regular menstrual cycle will only ignite one egg to grow. IVF stimulates all the follicles so that they all grow eggs within that cycle, and then they're released, or they're retrieved, and you have however many eggs are produced in that stimulation period of IVF. You then have a potential for all of those eggs to be fertilized. So I went into it thinking that I had 11 chances, praying, because nobody can do their own tests for quality. So I went into the process thinking, great, 11 eggs, hopefully they're all great quality, and I'll have 11 chances for it to work. That wasn't the case during the process, but that's the process that I took, and that everybody takes on the same journey, is understanding your cycle, because obviously you handle your cycle. You start on day 2 to take all the drugs that stimulate the egg growth, understanding what your ovarian reserve position is, knowing how many follicles you have, and then you're just flung into IVF. That from there on, you're flying blind. It's about how many eggs respond, and then the quality of the eggs that you have.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
So it's a very, very intense. Yeah. And until you're in the process, you no one knows, and one of the things that I was saying in my conversation last week was, it's interesting because my sister did come over to support me during the retrieval process, and she was like, I had no idea. I had sex twice, not twice ever, but she's got 2 amazing boys, and she just had sex and then she had babies. And so women, generally, unless you are in this process, we don't really know how it goes and what happens to us, and how difficult it actually is to even so many couples go through IVF, because there's no guarantee that eggs and sperm match either. And that fascinated me. That blew my mind. So
miracle of life.
And just it really is. It's an incredible miracle. And just going back to your question on why I went overseas, is because at the time I couldn't afford treatment here. Unfortunately, in Australia, I was considered socially infertile and not medically infertile, because at that stage I didn't have a partner. And then Medicare wasn't going to fund any part of that because I was socially and not medically infertile. And then when it becomes part of my journey, Australian donors aren't paid, so the pool of choice here in this country are very, very limited. In fact, some women have to go on a waiting list. So I was directed to go to the biggest cryobanks in the world, which are America and Europe. And I had to obviously make my choices through those. So I went to a country where I researched the many different clinics in the world, and this doctor had a very high success rate. So, and I did it for a month. I knew that the treatment I could afford in case I needed a couple of rounds, and I put three. Three was the number for me. That was where my cutoff was going to be, of how many times I actually wanted to put myself through it and what I could afford. And I was very lucky. Bowie, 3 was actually the number of eggs that I got out. 2 fertilized, 2 made it to embryo stage, and 2 embryos were put in, and Bowie made it. So very, very, the numbers were so low. The window of opportunity was so low. So I think he's here to change the world. This little guy, he came through, determined to beat all of those odds. His personality matches that will. He's going to be a world game changer. I just know he's here to do something really, really incredible, and I just feel blessed to be there guiding him, really. Yes, I think I've strayed, but I can't help but
so
light up when I speak about him.
You do, you can see it. It's all over you. It's in every cell of your being, just how this journey has also connected you even deeper to his soul. Like, it's, such a beautiful thing for him to know how wanted he is here in the world as well. So yeah, what a blessing. What a blessing. Darling, thank you so much.
Yes.
I love that you are so open about sharing all of your journey. I just would like to maybe dig into something a little deeper. And I want to know, how did it feel in your body when you were having these follicle stimulating hormones? If you can reference that to the difference it feels in your body when you're having a natural cycle. What were the things like? Did you feel more tired? Were you more hungry, ratty, bloated, emotional?
So I think I had the conversation with you as well that you might after this, but I remember saying I didn't feel hormonally balanced until I got pregnant, and then I didn't realize hence a menstrual cycle was until I got mine back, because I didn't bleed for 2 years from the day that I went for IVF. It was literally 2 days to the month where I got my first period back after having Bowie. So the IVF process, because you have to start on day 2, I remember I was very nervous. I was leaving the country. I was going to a foreign country, to a city that wasn't even, high in Western tourism. And I was worried that was going to affect my cycle, and it was going to, make it late or early. But I remember going into the clinic and getting all of my medicine, and then coming back, and the dose I think wasn't that high until I went in for my first. Only 2 eggs I think at that point were responding me emotionally. So from that point going forward, it was a very, very emotional experience. I've spoken to other women that have gone through IVF and were living their best life ever.
Okay.
And I think it's a very individual process, but I think because my menstrual cycles were always so full of emotion, I went from highs to lows every month. IVF was no different, and I think after that first scan, I was okay. I was happy. I was living in this hotel room. I was away from my life, on autoplay. I was watching, lots of series, and I just felt very relaxed and content and happy to be there. And then that so much emotion from then on, I just was an emotional. I did up the dosage of my hormones. I felt like I was on the worst period I'd ever been on. My body was blowing up, by the day. I was retaining so much fluid. Food wise, I wasn't loving it. I was trying to maintain. I was trying to find as many high tea foods that I could find, being in a foreign country, and just not knowing how to access all the fresh fruit and vegetables that I was so used to accessing. So I know I wasn't feeling great putting the nutrition into my body. I didn't feel as in control of all of that when I left the country. That's just comfort zone, right? You know where to go, you know what to get. So yeah, I was very, very emotional right through the entire journey. I felt at one point like, why me? Why is this happening to me? I do everything alone. Why am I doing this alone? And that was probably triggered to a lot of hormones going through my body at the time. But it wasn't until I actually got pregnant, and I was on very, very high doses of progesterone to support the period, and for my lining to thicken, and to support the embedment of the fertilized egg. But yeah, I didn't enjoy the process at all. I didn't like the hormones. I didn't feel good in my body. And it wasn't until I got pregnant and I came off a lot of those high doses of hormones that I actually really started to feel really good and really stable and just happy. Didn't have these erratic highs and lows. That's probably pregnancy as well. You're so connected to this little human that's growing inside your body, and there's just joy. You just feel joy all the time. I had a textbook pregnancy, no morning sickness, no nothing. I just felt very stable, very happy. I didn't respond emotionally to a lot of things. I was just very stable, and I at all. In fact, I was dreading it coming back. I think I had conversations where I said, I'll joyfully go straight into menopause from here, thank you, and never see another menstrual cycle again. It just had such a big effect on me, and I didn't realize until I didn't have it how nice it was not to have it.
And how was your last cycle? 'Cause I think you've had 2 bleeds now.
I think I've had three.
Okay.
Three, and it came back, I think 3 days after I stopped breastfeeding. There was no difference. It was just like, I was like, oh, maybe it will just flow back in nicely, just drip feed back in, but nothing. The day before, I was walking around feeling like I actually wanted to, destroy things and people. It was, I was saying to people, I bet you it's coming. I bet you it's coming back. I hadn't felt like that for a very long time, and it reminded me of God, how much I went through when I did have it. And it was just, yeah, and now it's been, and I have fallen back into the habit. I was tracking it obviously before I went to get pregnant, because I needed to know when my ovulation was, and was it coming on time, and just booking flights around all of that. But I haven't been tracking it because I'm gone back to being lazy again. I'm so busy. It's just, it's hit me. I've had, and then I'm like, I've bled, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense now. But it hasn't changed. It's the same, 3 days of quite intensive bleeding, and then I'll just sort of fizzle out over a couple of days. And that's how it was before I got pregnant, and that's exactly how it is, and I've seen change. The only thing that I haven't noticed is I don't swell as much. So I don't see my breasts swelling beforehand, and I don't get the big bloating before, which is really odd. There were days before I got pregnant, not days, months of period where I looked like I was carrying a small child already. The way that a lot of women's bodies respond to that, pre-bleed, few, that's all gone. So that's really different in my body. But everything else just as normal.
Well, my dear, this leads me to sharing that you and I are putting together a workshop next
Yes.
Tuesday. I feel it's like if anybody's watching this in time, the 10th. I think it's Tuesday the 10th.
Yes.
That will be
Yes.
live.
We've pulled it
And
forward.
we brought it forward because of at this particular time where Australia's in a lockdown scenario. So we feel it's a great opportunity to share how you can work with your menstrual cycle so as that you're not in a place of fear or dread, and you can work with the energy that's moving through you each 28 days, or 31 to 32 days, whatever your cycle is. And we're putting this together through the Empowerment Palace, which is Tan's new podcast. And I feel like there's going to be, a lot of healing for women around connecting to their cycle, and what the deeper significance of this monthly bleed is, and how with just very simple changes and reframing and mindset changes, they can look at it as actually being one of the most significant spiritual experiences that she can have. And it all starts with love, self-love and resting on those days of bleeding. And I feel like that would, be something that would greatly benefit you as well as every woman that is watching it, to be able to tune in so closely and be so connected to your flow as you were, and continue that now with the same depth of self-love that you did when you were going through the IVF experience, and be able to work with that in every day, I feel would be such a gift, for yourself, for your body, and for, your beautiful little human that is going to change the world. To see his mama, caring for herself in this way is also very, very, very important, especially when he's connecting with women as well.
Absolutely. And when you were on the Empowerment Palace, I was actually stunned. It was part of the conversation that women aren't doing more work around this.
Yeah.
And it shows up every month without fail for many, 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 many years. And, if we can help, expose more women to understanding the way their body is made up, and how we repeat the pattern every month, then I'm sure we can really help to change a lot of people's lives and their reactions to their menstrual cycle. So honored to be able to share that, and you facilitate it. It's just Empowerment Palace is just a platform for you to facilitate your incredible work. Thank you for doing what you do.
And there is a beautiful piece around being able to consciously sit together in circle or one-on-one, as we are now having these conversations. At one time, and it still happens today, that women can't openly share their experiences without the shame piece around it, and without the sisterhood wound arising in people. And that's something else I feel that we can talk about perhaps another time, but just to plant the seed, is that something that I've witnessed in you is that you are always cheering other women on. You're like their biggest cheerleaders, and you've been like that with me and all of the women in your life. I see that, and it's a really beautiful quality, Tan, and thank you. Thank you for sharing this work. Thank you for, being so open and honest and sharing your journey of having, Bowie land on this planet. Like, wow. And I cannot wait to go deeper and to play on Tuesday night. And if anyone's really wanting to join us and can't make it live, there'll be a recording available as well. And I'll put the links into the Empowerment Palace for that.
Oh, that would be epic. Thank you, my darling. Well, and likewise, it's so amazing how we've pivoted back to do this incredible work together. This is why I love who we are. We're always evolving, but we're always evolving, and we find our way back
and it's
together.
Cycling. We're
cycle.
cycling. We're always in cycles. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you for joining us in this recording today. And if you have any questions at all, please post them in the chat so that we can all benefit from each other's wisdom, knowledge, questions, answers, and curiosities. Much love.
Beautiful.